Is it crazy that Philly probably has the most pressure on them out of anybody, and like they've never made it to a conference finals? They're not the favorites this year, not even in the top two favorites out east. So it's like they probably still have the most pressure on them out of any organization in basketball.
I mean, listen to what you just said. They never made the conference finals.
I mean, sure that point, yeah, but
That's why they have the pressure. I feel like
that
is
point,
because
yeah,
they've
but
had
it's
Joel.
like all we talk about all year is Celtics Bucks, Celtics Bucks, Celtics Bucks, but it's still Philly that has the most pressure on them, which is like you would think the two teams that are the front runners would have more pressure, but it's like no, they don't. It's all on Philly, and it's like Philly for point of the season was kind of an afterthought, behind those two teams, but they started playing better basketball over the last couple of months, so they're kind of starting to reassert themselves into like a dark horse kind of conversation.
I think part of it too is that there's a little bit more fear and concern that Philly could end up slipping in a first or a second round to an opponent that they probably should beat, whereas people don't really think that's going to be a situation with the Celtics or with the Bucks. Now, if that happened, chaos could ensue, but I don't think that's really something that people are considering because I think most people think the Celtics and the Bucks will fairly comfortably get through the first round, even if it ends up going 6 or 7 games. They should look like the better team. And similarly, in the second round, most people expect that those are going to be the two teams in the Eastern Conference Finals. And until they prove otherwise come playoff time, I don't think people are going to be too worried about them potentially flopping like people are about the 76ers because we've seen them do it before time and time again.
I mean, just looking at the two front runners, like what do they have to even prove? I mean, I guess for the Celtics, you could say they need to prove that they can get it done and win a ring. But like Milwaukee, they've got their ring. They've proven themselves. A lot of people still say they would have went back last year if they had Chris Middleton. Like people's mindset is that the Bucks, when healthy, are the best team, and they've gotten to the mountaintop. Like they've proved that they can be the best team with this core. The Celtics, they were 2 games away from a championship a year ago, and they've been a conference finals mainstay for half a decade. Like they've shown that they've been on that stage. And even when it was like the baby Celtics in 2018, like they took it to 7. I mean, got out against Miami last year, had a couple other times in between. I can't remember if the bubble series went to 6 or 7, but they got into a deep one with Miami that year as well. And so it's like the Celtics have been there. They've been pretty far. And while they did come up short in that same time period in the conference finals for a while, now they've been there. Really right now it's like Philly, they bought in, they made their trade for James Harden, and they've had Joel Embiid, who I think a lot of people think is the archetype of a player who may decline quickly after 30. Like you never know what your timetable is with a player that's not only a 7-foot big man, but also a player that's had a bit of an injury history. So you're thinking you got to capitalize while the iron is hot. While you have him, while James Harden is only getting older, of course there's going to be a lot of pressure there because James Harden hasn't got a ring, hasn't been to a final since OKC, and yeah, he was playing against the Dynasty Warriors, but he still hasn't done it. Like the facts are just the facts. And then Embiid to not even gotten to a conference finals, especially when the East really didn't get too strong. And so maybe last year. So for him to not even break through then, and then to be like one of these top MVP candidates year in, year out and still not get there, it's a lot of pressure. And even like right now, the most pressure may be on like them. And then after them, it's probably like maybe like the Nuggets or Clippers, maybe. Because the Nuggets, like, I think people are thinking like, oh, Jokic is a 3-time MVP. Now we need to see it translate in the playoffs. That kind of gives them some pressure. And then, the Clippers bought in for Kawhi and PG, and they have one conference finals that Kawhi didn't play in to show for it. So, like, those teams do have some pressure there. I wouldn't say Phoenix is – I personally don't think Phoenix is under – I don't know if Phoenix is under too much because –
I think they're under a little bit, though, because we were talking like their window's probably, at least with Chris Paul being there, is probably not as big. Like, they might have this season and maybe one more year. Like, that's a maybe. And even though Chris Paul is declining, it's like, who are they going to be able to bring in to replace what he brings to the team? Even though he's not out here getting 18 and 10 assists like he was in his prime, he's still very valuable at what he does. And, his basketball mind is almost one of one. So I think there is a little bit of pressure on them. Like, they kind of should make the finals this year to give themselves a chance to win a championship with this current core. And it's funny saying that because KD just got there like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But
That's
Yeah,
the thing is midseason trades. I'll let you go ahead though.
I think that's the one good thing with the KD trade is this. It's similar to the Chris Paul trade, and the only difference now is that it's extending a window instead of opening it. But I think they gave themselves a couple more years. And the nice thing about the Chris Paul contract is they're in year 2 this year. Next year's only half guaranteed. The year after is non-guaranteed. They keep him around for one more year with KD, Book, and Ayton. That's their next run at it. If they want to get another point guard in, they can trade Chris Paul after next season with his last year on his deal. Someone will happily take him and buy him out because it's the non-guaranteed money. They can bring in another point guard in said trade, and they keep it going again with Booker and KD for a couple more years, assuming KD stays healthy, which, given injury concerns, questionable, but given the fact he's only 34, you could still get a few more good years out of him as long as he can stay relatively available. So I think they still have a few more years than they might have pre the Kevin Durant trade due to the fact now that they're not relying on Chris Paul being that guy alongside Devin Booker. If in a year's time they want to move off him and get another guy at point guard spot who might not be an elite point guard by any stretch because they're probably not going to have the assets or the financial flexibility to do so. But if they can go out and get a solid starting point guard, they'll be fine and they can still compete for a couple more years, assuming KD's still healthy and available to play for them.
yeah, that's why I said like just a little bit of pressure because, like you said, they did extend the window, and hopefully KD can stay healthy over that time. But that's just part of the concerns, like maybe why this season could be one of their best opportunities to do so. And with the West being, as we would consider, wide open, like there may not be a more clear opportunity for them to get to the finals. Because you never know what could happen. A team can add another star player in the West next season. Like you never know what can happen. So that's why they're definitely not under like near as much pressure as like a Philly. I would even argue like Boston or whoever else, but there's probably just a little bit.
If this wasn't a midseason trade, I think that they'd have a lot more pressure. If it was like a full season, it's like, oh, like KD did this thing in Brooklyn and now he's going and forming another super team going with Booker, CP3, and Ayton. And now if they don't get it done, it's going to be like a giant sell. But, the fact that it happened midseason, I think if somehow they do fall short, especially if it's like related to injury stuff, I mean, you're going to get like people on Twitter that are clowning them and everything. But like realistically, I don't know how many people's like legacies are like on the line here. Because I mean, Booker at the end of the day, his window is still quite wide. He's still not old at all. And then, like, I guess maybe Chris Paul, but like Chris Paul at this point is like the fourth option on this team. So it's like if this team loses, if they win, does it cement Chris Paul as like a GOAT? Like how much does that actually increase his standing at this point? Like think about that. Like think about that. If he gets a ring now, it's not like, oh, he went to this team and got them a ring. Like if that happened in 2021, yeah, maybe. But if they win the ring, it's going to be like, oh, KD and Devin Booker got this team a championship. So whose legacy is really on the line? What, Kevin Durant because he couldn't win one without Steph?
Bismack.
Well, I mean, the only one we said Kevin Durant and Devin Booker have a couple years. Chris Paul's the one who might be out. So it's like
we hope they have a couple years, but weird parallel. But KD was just in a situation where they made a midseason trade, and I'm sure that first year we're all thinking like, Kyrie got hurt and Harden was banged up. They never got back to even that point, getting to a second round game 7. So I'm just saying, yeah, it's a midseason trade. You're probably not expecting to win this season, but it would be nice if you could put yourself in position to at least get to the finals. So
definitely,
just little devil's advocate. That's what I'm saying, because we've seen situations very recently where teams make midseason trades, and that's probably their best opportunity to win the finals, and they don't even get there. So, hopefully the health is good and they can be the team that we're kind of expecting them to be even this season, but years past this as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think the Clippers definitely are a team that probably should have more pressure on them than there has been. I mean, it gets talked about a bit, but generally speaking, for a team that acquired Kawhi, that traded for Paul George, that gave up a player who's now arguably better than both of them at times throughout the year in SGA, to all the other names that they already have on this roster, from Russ to Norm to Eric Gordon, You have Zubac, you have Mason Plumlee, you have Marcus Morris. There are so many names on this roster, and they are just not getting talked about at all. And they're currently not even guaranteed to be in the play-in. Never mind a top 6 seed. And I feel like that's definitely a team that is missing out on some of the pressure that probably should be shifted their way a bit more.
I'm not a fan of the blame game, but I will say this. For a team like the Lakers won a championship, and these two teams were pretty much assembled at the same exact time. Both made major offseason additions the same offseason. Lakers won a championship, and they're talked about like they got more pressure than the Clippers. The Clippers have not done shit. They made one conference finals in a 4-year span. Like they made one conference finals. They missed the playoffs too, which doesn't get talked about. I know Kawhi was out. They still had a pretty solid team around Paul George. Missed the playoffs. So it's like you said, they don't get talked about nearly enough on the pressure scale. Like they should be, I think, right up there with Philadelphia. Because like you said,
100%.
the assets that they gave up to get Paul George, getting Kawhi Leonard, all the trades that they've made over the last couple of years. I just saw something earlier. The Knicks have Emmanuel quickly because of the Marcus Morris trade.
Yeah.
Like there's so many like pieces that they had to give up to get this core into place. Like they should be under, I think, the most pressure in the Western Conference, like even more so than Denver. Definitely more than like Phoenix. They should be right up there with like how we're talking about Philly. Like there should be a lot of pressure on this team to make. I don't even know if like making it to a conference finals is good enough. Like they damn near got to make it to the NBA finals and put themselves in a position to actually win that series, which we all don't really see that happening. Maybe Gabe does because he's a Clipper fan on the pod, but I definitely don't see that happening. So they, like you said, they should be talked about a lot more than what they are as far as pressure goes.
I agree. I don't know. I think the big thing with this team is like people think of it, and if you think about like what gives these teams this pressure, a lot of the times it has to do with their star. Think about like Philly, it's like, oh, Joel hasn't been to the conference finals. James Harden doesn't have a ring. Even like the Suns, it's like, oh, KD couldn't win without Steph. Oh, Chris Paul, he's never been able to get the job done. Looking at like Denver, oh, Jokic is a 3-time MVP, but he can't get to a finals. Like, is he really? I mean, if you're thinking 3 MVPs, you're thinking like top 10 player all time, but he can't even get out of the West once. And so you look at that, and then you come to the Clippers and you come to Kawhi, and it's like, I don't think people put pressure on Kawhi because, he already has 2 rings, 2 finals MVPs with 2 different franchises, including one of the greatest playoff runs we've seen in recent memory. And so given that, I think because people associate so much now teams with players and with stars, they're just not thinking about it like that. But if you do think about it from the organizational standpoint, I do think this organization does have a ton of pressure on them because they've sold everything and they've just kept building and they've kept building and they've kept bringing in players. And most of these guys aren't getting younger. Like they're now like the classic like retirement home type team. And you got a guy who like who on this team is getting better in the future? Who on this team haven't we seen the best basketball out of?
Brandon Boston.
Yeah, they're G League players.
And so at that point, like you look at that and it's like, yeah, they probably will have to get it done. But like, do we think they can get it done? I called them on the level of Philly, but we don't even know if they're going to be in the playoffs. And like, yeah, it's like a strong team, but more and more it's looking like that's just an on-paper thing because on paper, like we've seen Kawhi has played great. Paul George, he's had good moments, especially recently. And then like you look at the roster from top to bottom and it's just like, yeah, like Marcus Morris is a guy we've seen real good things out of. Zubac is a good center to have when you have a lot of really high-impact ball-dominant players because he doesn't need it. Russell Westbrook, he was in 6 Man of the Year contentions. He was playing decent. Like a lot of people were like, he might be a problem, but he's not the problem in LA, which is a big improvement from last year. I think, like Eric Gordon was a capable player. He just hadn't been in a good situation. Plumlee was doing good things. It's like this team has so many players that look good, and you say, well, why can't it work? And for some reason, whether that be players sitting out, whether that be just like lack of a true system, just because things keep flipping, whether it's because of the roster inconsistency, because they keep bringing new guys in so it can never become set and situated for a long time. Whatever that may be, this team has bought this much and is currently one game over 500, about a month away from the NBA playoffs. So if they don't get it together soon, yeah, man, this team is going nowhere fast, and that contender list is only getting smaller. At that point, if they don't start to get their stuff together, like I damn near already took Denver off of my contender list last week. I think given some stuff that we may or may not talk about, I don't know how you guys feel. The Grizzlies are probably not contenders this season anymore to me. So at that point, it's really the Suns and the field. Second at this point might be the Warriors. They might have just entered that because everybody else seems to be falling apart. Thank you.
Like the beam. I love when Gabe rants. I love it, man. Goes on those 5-minute tangents, man. I love it. But yeah, it might be different if like Kawhi stayed in Toronto and they were in this weird situation, because it's like Kawhi, 2-time champ, 1-1 for the Raptors. That's why we don't say Giannis is under any pressure, because he won a damn championship in Milwaukee and he's still there, probably gonna win another one. Like, that's why nobody says there's any pressure on Giannis, because he's still with the same team. But Kawhi left and brought Paul George basically with him, with the idea of, we want to win another championship for the Clippers, and they haven't put themselves in position to do so. So, moral of this conversation, there should be more pressure on them, but for some reason they won't get talked about. Maybe it's because they're always going to be the Lakers' little brother, and that's just how it's going to be in LA, like forever. Maybe it's that, but I don't know. I feel like like you said, they're one game above 500, and it's like nobody talks about it. Maybe it's like indifferent, like people don't really care too much enough to say something, but I don't know. If this was the Lakers that was the game above 500, they would be panicking. If it was, Golden State, they might still be panicking a little bit. Like with the Clippers, it's like nobody cares, which is just kind of weird.
It's the stars, man. I'm telling you, it's because Kawhi is a quiet, nice.
But people don't like Paul George though. People don't really like Paul George either. So it's like, and Westbrook,
that's a much better point.
And Westbrook is so polarizing too. Like, some people don't blame Westbrook for the Lakers stuff. Other people blame Westbrook for everything that went wrong in LA the last year and a half. So it's like, I don't know. It's weird.
It is weird. I will say on the Russ point, I do feel like the Clippers have got a little bit more blame and pressure on them over the last week, since they've been losing games with Russ in town. But I mean, when you're talking about a Clippers team, like you say, that is only one game above 500. I mean, they were 2 games above 500 last year, and Paul George didn't play half the season, and Kawhi didn't play. These guys have been around a lot more this season, and arguably with better surrounding pieces, and they're in the same spot. And that's definitely got to be putting some pressure, again, if not on Kawhi, and if not even fully on Paul George, then definitely internally on this organization.
I think in their last 20 games, since like Kawhi ramped it up, started playing like more games, I think they're like 12-8 in those games, which is like not good when your best player is finally back playing healthy. He's been playing really good basketball too. Like, it might be a deeper problem than just looking at their star players who's available. I don't know. Maybe it's a Ty Lue situation. Maybe they are cursed, Gabe. Like, that might be what it is. I don't know. It's just weird because Kawhi's back playing healthy. Paul George has been playing really good lately. They made all these trades. Plumlee's been a good addition. Like, Westbrook hasn't been bad per se. Hasn't been amazing, but he hasn't been like garbage. So it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's just a deeper problem than just their guys being healthy and playing. Like, might be more coaching, organizational stuff. I don't know. Just weird. Weird thing.